transactions don't complete. To give you an idea of the enormity of this issue, it's estimated that 1 in 6, or 5.2 million adults in the UK, have literacy skills beneath what's known as level 1, which is equivalent to a GCSE D or lower grade. So there's a very large population in the country who have very low literacy standards. I have an article here on the slide that mentions the Met Police. This was something that raised a year or so ago by the media, because they have around 300 staff whose job it is to proof and check colleagues' work. And this is all these individuals do. They're not acting supervisors or acting active police officers. Their work is just to proof work. We've found that so many cases were being thrown out of court by judges, by the Crown Prosecution Service, because literacy standards were not good enough, the standard of work was not good enough, and the Met then had to take action to change that. So we can see in a very practical way the impact this issue can have on the organisation. Looking at dyslexia, it's recognised as a specific learning difficulty affecting the development of literacy and language skills. Dyslexia affects 1 in 10, or 10% of the population. Now, an individual's experience of dyslexia may be very different to a colleague's in terms of the difficulties they have, but also in the severity. So dyslexia is actually quite a personal condition, while it is quite generic. Common difficulties, I'm sure you're all aware, there's issues and problems with reading and writing, sometimes being able to do that quickly, but also then to understand a message or trying to communicate out properly the message you want to give. Dyslexia can also carry issues around organisation skills, sequencing and memory, and quite often this can be a very difficult problem for someone who maybe struggles to keep time, turn up to meetings in time, and struggle to remember actually where a meeting might be. That said, dyslexia contains some very unique strengths. If you look at the head, or some of the heads of UK industry, the Bill Gates, the Richard Bransons, the Jamie Olivers of the country, they're all dyslexic. So while these individuals have some difficulties, they seem to have some sort of skills and skill set that's very valuable and very successful. Looking at dyslexic strengths, it can include innovation, problem solving, lateral thinking, and also seeing the bigger picture. And it's no surprise, bearing in mind those unique strengths that come with dyslexia, that GCHQ last year seek to recruit dyslexic staff. GCHQ is really the head of MI5, MI6, and what they have done is look to recruit dyslexic staff because they have these skill set that are really useful for breaking codes and for solving some very complex problems. So while dyslexia is a disability, it also seems to contain some very unique abilities. Looking at dyslexia again and some of these negative effects, we've said about slower work rate, poor quality of reporting and communication. It may take longer to comprehend and or complete documents, and quite often, especially with dyslexia, I've seen firsthand an awful lot of issues around stress level due to maybe not keeping up with the pace of work, maybe missing targets. Again, this can lead to things like low self-confidence, higher rates of absenteeism, even tribunal cases where an individual feels that their employer hasn't supported them properly. And most importantly for an organisation, efficiencies, and there can be time lost in having to proof and go back and correct colleagues' work. Looking at an organisation called Kent Fire and Rescue down in the south of England, they're a very dyslexia aware organisation and very proactive in supporting dyslexic staff. They have around 2,000 members, and around 10 years ago they had 2 dyslexic members of staff. So bearing in mind the 10% rule of dyslexia, you can see where they were quite a far distance off the figure they should have been in recognising that 10%. And this introduces us very nicely to a chap called Chris Caswell, and I've worked to support Chris over the last 5 or so years. Chris is dyslexic and struggles quite severely with his reading and writing skills, but is a very capable and competent fire officer and very valuable to his organisation. When Chris went to join the fire authority, it took him 7 attempts to complete the entrance exam. Chris could do all the running back and forth up the yard, putting out fires, rolling up hoses, running up and down ladders. He was very good at speaking and describing how he would go into a building to check it was safe, clear it out, and then begin to extinguish the fire. But when it came to doing the exam part, Chris really struggled. He struggled to read the questions and then actually to write a sufficient answer that would gain the pass mark. So Chris tried to enter Kent 4 times, failed both times at the paper part of the exam, went over to Hampshire, attempted twice there, failed again, and just before a 7th attempt, which he would have been his final attempt, he was sitting reading up on some course notes and read a statement, and the statement reminded him of his exam, and he started to think back to the exam and the questions, and he started to remember all the questions he saw were exactly the same. So with that in mind, Chris was able to memorize the questions, but also then find a coping strategy where he could write his answers in a bullet point form, which would be enough to satisfy a pass mark and answer the question. So when Chris sat down on his 7th attempt to become a fire officer, he knew the answers even before he read the questions. So completed the exam and progressed his career very quickly, and not too long into his service was acting as station manager, and his chief officer came to him and said, "Chris, I want you to progress to station manager role. There's one here, and I think you'd be very fitting for it, so I'd like to see you complete the course." Chris went on a 2-day course, and halfway through day 1, he left and went home because he spent all day sitting in front of a PowerPoint projector that he couldn't read and struggled to take notes from. Chris returned back to his senior officer and explained his problems and his issues, and they said, "Well, that's okay, let's see what we can do to support you." So they put together a dyslexia working group. Chris went for a dyslexic assessment. It was confirmed that he did have dyslexia, and they recognised some of Chris's specific problems. So the first thing they did was take away a pen and paper from Chris and give him a dictaphone. So when Chris went to a meeting, he could sit with his dictaphone, record all the minutes and all the notes without having to struggle to write and remember what he's hearing. Chris was also then given a copy of our software to support staff. It was introduced by the local college in Kent. And some of what our software did addressed Chris's needs. Where Chris struggles to read, our software is actually able to read aloud policy documents, training documents to Chris, so all Chris had to do was listen to them. Jumping forward a few years to today, where we are now, Chris is now the station manager. He's completed his entrance exam. He is now studying for a master's degree in business management. Chris is still dyslexic, by the way, still really struggles to read and write. But most importantly, Chris is also a senior manager in their policy and documentation team. So Chris would spend a lot of his day reading some very large policy documents and also then having to write and amend the policy for their own authority. So you can see how a dyslexic person might have some difficulties. If they're given adjustments and support to overcome those, they can then actually succeed and use the skill set that they have to do very well. I came across a report in the summer of this year from the Equality and Human Rights Commission that might interest you. And it talks about disabilities generally, and there is reference to dyslexia. And some of the quotes from that read that disabled people do not want to be singled out for special treatment. They're looking for company-wide solutions that support all workers to do the job effectively. And quite often, many of these adjustments don't just help those with impairments or disabilities, they can be useful for everybody. Thinking back to the example of Chris at Kent Fire and Rescue, to be given a dictaphone could be helpful to all of us. We don't need to worry about trying to write down. We can actually sit and listen and concentrate to what is going on at the meeting, and then we have the dictaphone to go back and make notes from or go back over everything again. So to give you a little bit more information about ourselves, about myself, our company is called TextHelp. We were established in 1996. We're based in Antrim in Northern Ireland. I think my accent probably gives away a little that I'm not local. But really we're operating globally, and our mission is to develop life-changing software to assist people with literacy difficulties and dyslexia. We also produce technology that can be helpful
The conference is now in presentation mode.
The software can also be helpful to those who have English as a second language. We also provide support and training to our software as well, which as I go through the presentation you'll be able to hear. So what is read and write software? You can hopefully see on your computer screen across here just where my mouse is. a toolbar, a bar of different features that can help with reading and writing and some of those dyslexic difficulties that we've talked about. I actually have the software turned again on the top of the computer, just across the top of the screen. And it's designed to help with reading, writing and also research. One of the main things the software can do is to read aloud all electronic and paper-based documents. So for someone who can't read, if they're using our software, the software can actually do the reading for them, but still help them understand what they're looking at. Read and Write also contains features to help with, as I said, dyslexia, literacy difficulties, English as a second language, and as a result of using our software, I hear a lot of reports of where employee confidence levels are increased and where people like Chris Caswell have been encouraged and empowered to go and develop their career and actually be successful. In support of our software, we have a full technical support team back in the office who can be contacted by phone, web or email. We also deliver then training. Training can take many types. We can deliver end user training, which is just going into a one-on-one course. We can do this online. We can do it at someone's office. We also deliver a Train the Trainer course where we can take a group of individuals, and it's a day-long course, a very practical course looking at the software, looking at how to do different things with it, but also then as part of that, creating a certified trainer aspect to that. So anybody who wants to go on and be able to train others in using our software, we give them the skills, the power, and we actually certify them in being able to do that. We also supply supporting documents on how to use the software, from something as small as just a half-page introduction card to a 30-page how-to guide and document. We also have video tours that can be seen online on YouTube pages. We also provide these within the software as well, so someone can call on the software and actually look at how to use different features within that. So how can Read and Write do all these things? The first thing I said about was this option for speech, text to speech. There's a play button, a play shape button, which again is on the toolbar here, which is just like the play button on your CD player or your recorder player at home, which really is where speech will come from, which gives sound. So if you click on that, you can listen to what you're looking at. So it's designed to minimize the time spent reading, but also help understanding. And for those maybe with dyslexia who struggle to read, it takes away that difficulty of trying to read. They can actually just sit and listen to what they're looking at. We have another tool, which is called Spell Checker, which is really just that. It goes through and helps you spell check your document. We've written this and programmed this to be dyslexia friendly and dyslexia aware. The way a person with dyslexia may make a spelling mistake may be very different to someone who does not have dyslexia. For example, spelling a word by the way it sounds. To give you an example, the word photograph, if it was spelled F-O-T-O, is actually quite logical and by the sounding of the word quite correct, but by the laws of English language it's wrong. So the software knows that if a person is trying to spell a word and sounding out letters, it can correct that way. Another dyslexic issue may be to reverse letters or get letters back to front. So for example, the letter D could be confused with the letter B. Even turned upside down, it could be a P or a Q. S's, Z's and also the number 2 can quite often be confused. So when the spell checker is running its search and checking for these sort of errors, it should hopefully pick this sort of problem up. There's another feature that can be very helpful, and it's this music note sign, and it's the ability to make MP3 audio sound files of speech. So imagine looking at an email and thinking, I would like to listen to that again or listen to it away from my computer. You can use our software to make this sound file of speech and listen to it maybe on the tube going home through your mobile phone. You could attach it to an email and listen to it at a later time. We have some organisations who use this feature to communicate out policy and HR documentation when they say that they are an inclusive employer, and send out an HR policy in a written format that excludes some of those staff who maybe have literacy problems or cannot read. They're not being very inclusive, but to attach a spoken sound file of all the information within the email, the council and the organisations that we're working with can say they are inclusive and are equal and diverse. We also have some features that can be very helpful to gathering information. and actually presenting that. And as I go through the demonstration part of the software, hopefully that will make sense to you. Looking then at where Read and Write is used, historically our background is very much within the education industry, supporting schools, private students, individual students, and also college and university students. And it's interesting to note that 97% of colleges and universities in the UK have a large-scale deployment of our software. So students are very familiar with their software, comfortable with it, and able to succeed and do well. And this leads us very nicely into the workplace. We find a lot of our students and customers have brought their software into the workplace to continue working and continue working well. And you can see on this slide some of the organisations that we're working with, again at a large scale deployment level to support their staff. For example, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office here in London as well have a mass deployment that entitles every PC and every laptop in the organisation to have the software. And they've also pushed out this allowance globally. So if you walk into an embassy in Iran, for example, our software should be there as well. And it's being used to support staff, not just with dyslexia, but also then those people who maybe have English as a second language. Perhaps their English is very well spoken and understood, but in a written format, maybe it's not just so strong. So Read and Write has the ability and the tools to help someone correct and proof their work and understand what they're looking at. Other London organisations, just while I'm in London today, that use the software very successfully include Transport for London, also Metropolitan Police and Wandsworth Council. We also do a lot of work with unions as well to support individuals. Unite obviously is one that I'm here with today, but we've also done many projects with the TUC, PCS and many other organisations. We also work with the Fire Brigades Union, and the fire industry in the UK about 2 years ago started to really want to look at the issue of dyslexia. They were finding more than 10% of their staff were having dyslexia and dyslexic difficulties, and were really driven to work better and support their staff and best support them. So the challenge was there were individuals coming forward saying, I have dyslexia, I need help. Employers and the union actually didn't quite know the best way to help. I've heard stories of where individuals have been given laptops, software, all sorts of fancy bits of kit. For one individual, it totaled £15,000. 6 months later, the chap left the fire authority anyway because he still couldn't work any better. He was just given all these solutions but no support and training to work better. So Fire Brigades Union wanted to find a unified approach, something consistent and something that would work. So this was union-led. They started off by raising dyslexia awareness. They engaged with dyslexia organisations to train their members to be able to identify dyslexia and then also know what to do to support someone who had dyslexia. And the support was very much around individual support and also solutions. Read and Write was one of those solutions that they chose, and I received a phone call to come and present, quite similar to today, to a member of their union learning representatives that identified dyslexia, understood it, and wanted to see how to best work with it. So, like today, I talked to them, gave them some information around dyslexia, a lot of which they knew already, but then talked about where our software could be helpful to those individuals, and also more importantly to the union itself. I gave a demonstration of the software bearing in mind those dyslexic difficulties, and it was quite interesting to see how those union learning reps, understanding dyslexia, could see what I was showing actually being helpful to those people they were trying to work with. So Fire Brigades Union as a whole organisation took on the software. They took on the software with 2 days certified train-the-trainer courses, so they had 20 members in total who were qualified to go off and support Fire Brigade Union staff and go into fire authorities and support HR managers and equality and diversity leads to support their staff and change the culture within the organisation, but more importantly help these individuals, help them complete progression exams, help them maintain their employment, and also help them to work better. So pleased to say that's working very well, and we now have quite a large number of fire authorities themselves have taken on our software as one of the methods to support staff with dyslexia. So how can Read and Write be made available? We can install it as a single user license. this will install directly onto an individual's machine. There's Read and Write Mobile, which comes on a USB on a key drive, and this is something I'm using today. I'm not using my laptop today to make this presentation, but using my USB, I can bring my own copy of Read and Write with me and bring it onto the screen, so I'll let you see that working very shortly. I'd said about the whole organisation approach, and this can be done through our site license solution, where a whole organisation has entitlement for the software. This can be very helpful where an organisation finds they maybe have a large dyslexic population, or maybe they have more and more numbers coming forward and they want something already in place for when those people come forward. Working with the Fire Brigade Union, for example, again, part of the issue was that fire officers were not coming forward. They were struggling in silence. They were embarrassed to declare that they had dyslexia. They thought that because they had dyslexia they were not intelligent enough to do the job, or that they were just slow, and that's not the case. So the site license actually made provision for those staff who didn't come forward and declare their disabilities or their difficulties, but yet because the software was there, it actually made provision for them anyway, and they could use the software until they felt comfortable to come forward. And also, as part of the site license, because this was carried out and those hidden members saw that the organisation was taking this approach to support them, they actually felt comfortable and empowered to come forward and ask for help. So quite often a solution like this can be very good at supporting those members who maybe choose to hide their difficulties. I'd like to use the opportunity at this point just to let you know that members of Unite are entitled to a 20% discount of the software. So for example, where a single user license is normally £320 plus VAT, Unite members and their families can purchase a single user license at £256 plus VAT, and this can be done by contacting ourselves directly at TextHelp. To let you know a little bit about the future and sort of where technology seems to be going, I'm sure someone on the call has either an iPhone or an iPad or a tablet or a smartphone even, and this is where we see education and also business going. We find more and more businesses using iPads to communicate and different things. I've been working with, again, police and fire authorities, and the iPad is going away, taking away the need for a pen and paper and also a camera. It's a single device that can do multiple things and be very useful for gathering evidence, for taking photographs of evidence, but also for note-taking and communicating. So again, our technology is starting to go this way as well. We're starting to develop some of our technology, some of our speech capabilities, some of our spell checking and dictionary tools to support individuals using these devices as well. So hopefully that will be useful in the workplace. So it's very interesting to see each day, each week, the developments that we have in this new emerging sector are very interesting. It's very interesting to see how business and people are using this new technology, but it's great to say that we're there and we're able to support people. Now for the good part, I will be quiet a little bit and start to let the software do some of the talking. So I'll let you see how the software can help from a reading perspective, bearing in mind those dyslexic difficulties where it might take someone 2 or 3 times to read a document to really understand it. Imagine having to do that with all your emails, read those 2 or 3 times. How much slower your working day would be. With our software, for the information spoken to you, it can hopefully speed things up and make everything an awful lot more accurate for you. And again, on the flip side of that, we want to look at how Read and Write can help with writing, composing, and also proofing documents to make sure that something is professional, but also easily understood by the people who are reading it. So if you can just bear with me, I have a short screen change to make, and that will be us. Thank you.